Good morning, Texas Baptists. As he mentioned, my name is Greg Love. I'm co-founder and director of Ministry Safe. In addition to that, I am a 36-year lawyer, not a 60-year lawyer. That 60 years of experience is the combined experience of my wife, who's also my law partner in this particular realm. So more than 3 decades each of trying to address sexual abuse matters, especially with a heart that beats fastest for the church. So the goal here is we want to focus on loving our neighbors. I really want to refine our focus in loving our children. So, of course, Scripture says, Jesus says, do not hinder them. But I think what he would also tell us is do not hurt them. Especially do not hurt them in our church. Now, I want to be real and I want to be raw with you because I want to use the time that they've given me. I want to use it wisely. But I also want to ask those who have been victimized to give me a little bit of grace because I want to be real and raw, so that those people who have not been victimized might have a new urgency, a new priority, a new willingness to take a look at this rather than just assume everything is okay. So being a trial lawyer, not somebody who's a sexual abuse expert that's a former prosecutor or somehow involved on the criminal justice system, you see, I'm a civil trial lawyer. And why that's important, 2 very significant things about that as it relates to prevention of sexual abuse. See, as a civil trial lawyer, I go to work when I get a phone call after a train wreck. Okay, something has to go wrong for me to go to work. Now, I may get that phone call from a victim's family, from the U.S. Olympic Committee, church leadership, an insurance carrier, but nonetheless, I'm going to be invited to stand over a train wreck. Now, when I come to that train wreck, I'm going to bring with me a lens. Now, in the legal world, we call it a standard of care. Okay, that's just a snappy legal term for this is the lens I'm going to bring to evaluate. This is what you should have been doing. Now, when I stand over that train wreck, oftentimes I find this is what you in fact were doing. Now, if there's a difference between what you should have been doing and what you were doing, that gives rise to liability. Okay, we call it negligence, sometimes gross negligence. But nonetheless, that's when things go bad, all right? But after 30 years of standing over those train wrecks, you see, I get to see something you don't. Okay, because I'm doing this hundreds of times, I get to see the patterns. And believe me, my friends, there are patterns to this crisis. I don't care what denomination, I don't care if it's faith-based or secular, okay? There are patterns to this train wreck. Now, actually, that's good news. You didn't probably hear that, but a pattern is good news. Because you see, if something has a pattern, it makes it predictable. And if something's predictable, it's preventable. That's what's on the lawyer's coffee cup, okay? But see, it's good news that it's preventable, but see, there's the downside to this, okay? So in terms of the observations I wanted to make is there are challenges, but here's where I want to start. This risk is knowable, it's just not intuitive. You can do it right, but you're never going to accidentally get it right, which means we're going to have to intentionally and with priority focus on what does it mean, this sexual abuse thing? How is it going to unfold in a church? It's knowable, there are patterns. We have to go to work, okay? So part of my goal is to challenge you a little bit. I want to shake the cage. Because what I am learning is not only a civil trial lawyer standing over the train wrecks, we're getting an average of 5 to 6 phone calls a day from organizations that are in or near the ditch. And some of them are from you guys. And see, I guarantee you, it is a very high priority when you're in the ditch. I want to encourage you to take the opportunity to evaluate your priority, give it a little bit more urgency so we can avoid those ditches. Okay? So with that being said, how do we kick this off? How do I want to use 25 minutes? Because I can't solve this problem in 25 minutes. So here's what I want to do. I want to make you uncomfortable. And I want to do it unapologetically. And the reason why I can be unapologetic about it, you see, as a parent, this has to be uncomfortable for me so it doesn't become my child's experience. I got to get it on me so it doesn't get on her. So, join me in that, will you? Because when I try to talk to people about this risk, it's 2025, it's almost 2026, and I guarantee you there is no shortage of headlines. Okay, this problem continues, but why does this problem continue? Why does this continue in the church? And see, after the decades of standing over these train wrecks, I'm going to give you an answer to that question, okay? And the answer to that question is we're doing the wrong things. Now, a moment ago, if I would have said to you, hey, are you doing anything to protect children at your church? Most people will look at me and they'll give me that Sunday morning smile and say, absolutely. Children are very important here. We're familiar with Matthew 19:14. Now, what if I pressed you a little bit? And I said, okay, what are you doing to protect children at your church? And you're going to back up a minute. You're going, wow, that's uncomfortable. Is he really asking me that? Come on. But I am. Now, typically, here's the answer that I get. So we're not doing this one-on-one. You're going to tell me about your background checks. You're going to tell me about your child check-in system. You're going to tell me about your 6-month member rule, your 2-adult rule, your video cameras, your policies and procedures, and that officer that you have there on Sundays and Wednesdays. And I'm going to nod at you, and I'm going to smile, and I'm here to tell you that's not going to protect my child in your church, okay? Our efforts are not related to the risk, by and large. I don't mean that for all of you, because I know a lot of you, I'm working with you already, okay? But our efforts are not related to the risk. Now, let me put that in a way in which we can understand that. Because you see, my world, again, is not intuitive, and I need to appreciate that. So let me go ahead and describe it to you this way. Let's say you have something special, something valuable that you want to protect, okay? Typically, we talk about, let's use a garden as an example. You've got a beautiful garden you've been working on and you want to protect it, okay? You're going to build a protective barrier, a fence, okay? Most of you probably have a fence, but here's fence 101 for you. The type of fence you build is driven by what you want to keep out. Everybody with me on that? Now, that's intuitive, okay? The type of fence you build is driven by what you want to keep out. Okay, so we're going to build a fence, but you see, when I tell you to go build that fence, you're going to need a little bit more information from me. So I might clarify a little bit. Let's say you want to keep your neighbor's livestock out of your garden. You're just like, I got it. I'm going to go to the hardware store, metal stakes, barbed wire, and an extension cord. I'm going to build a barbed wire fence, and you know what? That barbed wire fence to protect your garden is perfectly acceptable at keeping livestock out of your garden. But you know what? It's absolutely worthless at keeping bunnies out of your garden. And that's the point. We're building beautiful barbed wire fences, and the bunnies, so to speak, are ripping our ministries. Okay? So I need for people to understand more about this risk so you don't go to bed at night thinking, hey, I'm good to go here. You know, that Mr. Love, I hope these other people are listening to him. All of you stay with me for a moment. Because what I see by and large is when you look at your fence, too often it's a barbed wire fence. Okay? And just to short circuit this a little bit, my friends, this is not the problem. Larry Nassar at USA Gymnastics did not drive a white van. Okay? But so often, I need to get that off, that's just too creepy. We have this idea of what risk we're trying to solve, and we're building fences and we're doubling down on our fences. But you see, most of the time we think we're fine, and what I learn in my part of the world is that compounds the problem. How does that compound the problem? Watch this. If you're building the wrong fence and you think it's the right fence, when will you ever make changes? Chances are you won't, unless one of two things happens. You get good information or you suffer a crisis. Part of the Texas Baptists and Susie and her team are desperately trying to give you this information in the former. Get it when it's comfortable. Change the priority. Give it some urgency. Now, I know this is the part of the presentation that I'm essentially going to tell you, here's the problem. And you're just like, thanks a lot, lawyer boy. I've got cancer, right. It's like, well, join me at 2 o'clock and we're going to do chemo, all right? Because this is my opportunity to shake the cage, and I want you to join me at 2 o'clock for a session where we're going to start solving the problem. But we're not through shaking the cage. So let me shake a little harder, won't I? I want to go ahead and just spend a little bit of time that I have when you hear me talk about, okay, well, what is this problem? You think I'm not going to do this well? You think I've got a wrong fence in place? I'm going to go to 2 places. I want to show you 2 things. Oh, I like lots of things I'd like to show you. lots of train wrecks, lots of patterns. But by and large, what I see are the biggest things I need to undo or untangle is your reliance on background checks and stranger danger. Background check. No, I am a background check provider, but I'm here to tell you it gets us into the ditch. How? Okay? Let's talk about that for just a moment. When we talk about background checks, okay. They say that God is in the weather, but the enemy is in the tech, okay? And I tend to agree with that, all right? So when we talk about background checks, the problem isn't background checks. The problem is how heavy our reliance on background checks. Okay, so here's one of the things I need you to know about sexual abuse as criminal behavior. Less than 10% of sexual abusers will ever encounter the criminal justice system. Okay, let that sink in. That's rude, isn't it? Now what does it mean, encounter the criminal justice system? Get arrested. See, after the arrest, there's a variety of different ways in which the criminal matter can resolve or not resolve, but it starts with an arrest record. Less than 10% of sexual abusers will ever be arrested. Now, what does that mean in practice, okay? What that means is even if Jack Bauer and CSI Miami are teamed up to do your background checks for you, more than 90% of the people that wish to hurt our children have no record to found, and they know it. Okay, it's like, whoa. Now, this is not, I remember teaching at Southwestern once, and I had a student see me about 6 months after that particular class, and he walked up to me and my wife at a restaurant and said, Mr. Love, excuse me, I know you don't remember me, but I was in your class, and I want you to know there's some good information right there. And actually, I took that information back to our church leadership, and we studied it, and we voted, and we saved $500 on our budget. So like, that's awesome. How'd you do that? He goes, we stopped doing background checks. It's like, you're an idiot. Okay? I had to write him a letter on the law firm letterhead that ways I no way implied or suggested you stop doing criminal background checks, okay? It's like, background checks are here to stay. My point at this juncture is it can't be the only thing we do. If you're running background checks, don't put a check in the box and think, I'm good to go. It's got value. Now, and there's a whole lot of other things I'd like to share with you about background checks, but for the sake of time, I want to go to that next big basket of misconception that we're trying to deal with. Because, see, this is just factual. I've got a lot of smart people in the room that can take in data, take that data and put that into their decision making, but this next difficulty is hard. Because, you see, this one is dyed into the fabric of our wool. It's this idea that sexual abusers have a visual profile. And I'm just here to tell you they don't, okay? And it's this idea of stranger danger that's kind of baked into our cake. Stranger danger is our natural and well-practiced default way to do child protection, even your own children, okay? But I'm here to let me ask you this question. Is stranger danger valuable? You know, a lot of you looking at me, I think it is, but I think he's going to say no. I'll be very still. Smart people right here, okay? Stranger danger is just the label on how we naturally do it. So let me run with that for a moment. I remember the first time I heard stranger danger, I must have been about 8 years old. Remember, I'd watch cartoons on Saturday mornings, and right between how a bill became a law and Conjunction Junction, okay? Yep, y'all are my people. There'd be that little vignette of little kids on the playground. Here comes this dirtbag with a trench coat, and he walks over to them and he goes, will y'all help me find my puppy? And all the little kids would stand up and they'd point and yell what? Stranger danger. And they say it really slow, okay, and the camera pans out, and all these adults over here are like, hark, and they run to help, and the dirtbag runs away. Now, as cheesy as that was as an 8-year-old, it's like, I get it. Now, I've never heard anybody yell stranger danger in my neighborhood, and I promise you, in the neighborhood I grew up in, that's where you would have heard it. But I get the point. Now, stranger danger is the label on how we do it. But here, I want to answer that question, but I want to go a place first. I want to give you some good information quickly, take you to a fact pattern, and then I want to come back and answer this question because it's fundamental and foundational that we answer this question. Okay? First is to give you good information. There are types of abusers. Now, a lot of you are like, oh, seriously? Come on, it's not even lunchtime. There's types of abusers? Like, yep, there's types of, and you need to know that. I want to contrast two. First one is your abduction offender, white van, okay? Your abduction offender may have no relationship to the child or the child's family, simply sees the opportunity, grabs the child, goes. Okay, kid walking home from a sleepover, kid unsupervised at the fall festival, grabs a child, we'll get the alerts on our phones, we'll see the story on the news. The story usually ends a few days later, and it's usually awful. Everybody tracking with me? Abduction offender. Now, on the waterfront of child sexual abuse risk, where the studies tell us there are 60 million sexual abuse survivors in the U.S., 1 out of 5 Americans, on that waterfront, the abduction offender represents less than 10% of the problem. Less than 10%. Okay, contrast that with the preferential offender. Don't forget that word, preferential offender. Preferential offender may be male or female, have an age-appropriate adult willing to have sex with him or her, but prefers a child as a sexual partner. And that's messed up. It's not just any child, it's usually a child within an age and sex of preference. You see, there's a narrowness to the deviance. Jerry Sandusky, boys ages 9 to 14. Larry Nasser, girls ages 10 to 15. Okay, there's a narrowness to it, but up on that waterfront of child sexual abuse, the preferential offender represents more than 90% of our problem. My brothers and sisters, that is our problem. Okay? Now, that's the good information. Now, let me take you to a fact pattern. Now, as you can imagine, in my line of work, we get a lot of calls where the wheels come off. Now, remember, several years ago, there was a very large church that had multiple buildings on its campus, and the wheels came off in children's ministry. Now, the particular building that was used for children's ministry was a horseshoe-shaped building. Everybody, y'all are Texans, right? Everybody with me on the horseshoe shape? Okay, good. There was a fence across the top of the horseshoe. And so it created this little courtyard area. A lot of windows looking at, a lot of supervision. They put a structure in that courtyard, and that became the playground for the little kids. And on one particular Sunday morning, a 6-year-old boy wooed a 4-year-old little girl into one of these paneled areas in the base of the structure, little box area. And he victimized that little girl with 2 staff members sitting 20 feet away. Little girl goes home with her parents, very withdrawn. And at lunch, she seems very non-communicative. The parents knew there was something wrong, but see, she lacked the vocabulary to even describe what she had endured. Now, they finally got enough information out of her and they understood her. More importantly, they believed her. Don't think that always happens. They called church leadership. Church leadership called Kimberly and I. We came to that church that next Sunday morning, got there early, went to that playground. Same 2 women were setting up the playground, approached them and said, ladies, can we talk to you for a moment? They both said, yeah, of course. We need to talk to you about the sexual abuse situation that unfolded on your playground last week. Both of them backed up and said, that's not possible. It's like, actually, it is possible, but tell me why you think that. And both of them said, because we have a fence. See it? See, for both these women who love Jesus and love these children, where did they think the risk comes from? Outside the fence. Okay? What they didn't know was more than 90% of the risk happens on this side of the fence. Okay, but they cared about the children, didn't they? But see, there was a problem. Okay, now we're going to come back to both those, but now I want to take you to the question, is stranger danger valuable? But see, with that information, I can now ask you a better question. Here's the better question. Will stranger danger help you protect children from the abduction offender? Answer, perhaps. Will stranger danger help you protect children from the preferential offender? Answer, absolutely not. In fact, it will compound your problem because it continues to reinforce the idea that there's a visual profile to alert you to risk. Okay? Now let's get practical. Let's get into that list. Remember, background checks, 2 adult rule, 6-month member rule. Because when we talk about the risks in churches and we truly understand it's the preferential offender is our problem, there's a refinement I need to give you in that because it's called peer-to-peer sexual abuse. How many of you have heard that term? Peer-to-peer. Child with child inappropriate sexual behavior, and I'm here to tell you after COVID, that will be the biggest problem facing our churches that will be required to solve. Solvable, not intuitive. On that playground, you see, I had a peer-to-peer situation. So when we're evaluating the preferential offender as a risk and evaluating peer-to-peer sexual, let's go back to the original metaphor. The type of fence you build is driven by what you're keeping out. You see, the livestock is my way to try to help you identify the fence you build to keep out the abduction offender. Now, do we want to keep out the abduction offender? Absolutely yes. And you know what I can tell you diagnostically after 30 years of this practice? You're killing it. How do I know that? I have yet to get a phone call from someone having a child abducted from second grade or a VBS. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. But it represents less than 10% of the problem. My better question that I would ask a church, and trust me, I have, what are you doing at your church to protect children from the preferential offender? You see, when I have tried to just skip to the back of the answer of the math book, and I ask that question, typically the answer I get from ministry leaders is, I'm sorry, protect the who from the what? If you've never heard of the preferential offender, you have a barbed wire fence. If you've never heard of peer-to-peer sexual abuse, we have a serious gaping hole in those children that we don't want to hinder, okay? So when we go into that list, let's just do that for a second, okay? We're going to talk about the grooming process, but when we talk about risk, we've got that 6-month member. Let's go down the list. Let's just focus on peer-to-peer sexual abuse. Will your background check help you on a peer-to-peer sexual abuse issue? Answer is no. Okay. What about your 6-month member rule? No. Child check-in system. Okay, watch this. Will your child check-in system help you protect a child from the abduction offender? Perhaps. Will your child check-in system help you protect a child from the preferential offender? Absolutely not. No offense to your child check-in system, it never was meant to. Will your child check-in system help you protect a child from peer-to-peer sexual abuse? No, it will not. Okay? Here's a trick question for you. With respect to peer-to-peer sexual abuse, will your 2-adult rule help you? See, it's a trick question because the answer is it depends. Typical lawyer answer, okay? But see, the better question, depends on what? It depends on what your 2 adults know. Because you see, on my playground in that horseshoe-shaped facility, I had 2 adults, but I had 2 adults who had no idea that peer-to-peer sexual abuse was a thing, or preferential offender. They were killing it on that 10% outside the fence. You see, on that playground, I could have had a 6-adult rule, and it would have made no difference. Training is the key. We've got to change what you believe shapes what you do. What you believe shapes what you see. Not unlike the gospel, okay? But in this particular situation, because it's not intuitive, we have a little more work to do. Now, that's the preview of what we want to cover in the afternoon. This was my desire to make you uncomfortable, unapologetically. Let's use this as the battle cry for doing those things so that if we're going to keep those things out from hindering the children coming, let's make sure they're safe when they do. Okay? So when we talk about sexual abuse prevention, all right, this is what I'm looking for. Just so you don't hear me say, well, what are you doing to protect neener? That doesn't make me happy. Okay? When we talk about protecting children from the preferential offender and peer-to-peer sexual abuse, the foundation of that is education. It's sexual abuse awareness training, which is required in the state of Texas, by the way. Texas Youth Camp Act and some of these associated, legislation. Texas is the most training required state in the country, and I'm a fan, okay? Skillful screening. We'll talk about what that means to skillfully screen. Tailored policies and procedures, an appropriate background check. We're going to walk through a diagram on how this doesn't just look in a list, but what it looks like in function. Okay, and I'm going to invite all of you who are not Ministry Safe members, like, how? There's the why, it's an urgent, important. The what, 5-part safety system. The how is I want to invite you to evaluate the resources at Ministry Safe, and the Texas Baptists are going to make that easier than ever to be able to access that. So come at 2 o'clock. Now, I hope you've got lots of questions. In fact, we're encouraging you to ask questions. And once again, I'll put up the Voodoo QR code that if you have those questions, because in the afternoon session, of course, we can answer all of your questions completely in less than 20 minutes. So just go ahead and get those in. But the most important thing is I'll bet you $1 and a cake pop, half of you will have the same questions. They will not be a surprise. Bring your questions. Let's address that at 2 o'clock. And I just wanted to also, knowing that I've been here, and especially in the back area, there used to be a time in my youth that when I would see law enforcement, when I would see a cop, that was the person I avoided and I ran away from sometimes. But seeing law enforcement here gives me great satisfaction and comfort. And I just want you to join me in a round of applause for those people that allow us to have this meeting. Thank you, law enforcement, wherever you are. Thank you, Texas Baptist.